conference is held. This conference is being held both in person at the MU on Tempe campus and online in Zoom. The Zoom link, in case anybody here needs to leave and still wants to connect, is links.asu.edu/AAAD. For all sessions, if you are remote, please put your questions in the Q&A. The chat is not being moderated, so we don't want to miss any questions you might have for the day. And for those of you here in the room, you'll have an opportunity at the end of each session to ask questions, and we'll take turns with our virtual friends, and we'll pass the mic around. A brief history: the Universal Design and Accessibility, Accessible Technology Working Group was founded initially by Gemma Garcia, who recognized a need. Gemma is currently our Executive Director of Learning Technology in the Office of the University Provost. Cool. When she started those meetings, there'd be between 4 and 7 of us in the room at any one time. Sometimes the meeting collapsed because there wasn't anyone available to come into the room. But over the years, we have expanded our membership. Anyone here is able to join. We have tabled at events for faculty, developed video shorts and self-directed courses. We've presented at the Professional Development Conference and produced workshops and events for Global Accessibility Awareness Day since 2018. This year, we're excited to have this first ASU Accessibility Awareness Day conference, and it will be the 3rd Thursday of every year, so put it on your calendars. Before we go any further, I'd like to pause for our ASU land acknowledgement.
University is located in Indian country. There are 22 tribal nations in Arizona. ASU's campuses are situated on the homelands of many indigenous peoples, including the Akimel, O'odham, and Peepash.
Arizona State University recognizes the original inhabitants of these lands
and recognizes that they still reside throughout the Phoenix metropolitan area.
And we recognize the impact of their wisdom and generosity towards us.
If you've flown into the valley, you have undoubtedly seen the Salt River Project canals that surround the area.
Those modern-day canals follow the framework of the canals originally constructed by ancestral Sonoran Desert people who will come to make this area both livable and a place where peoples could thrive.
We acknowledge that the modern-day indigenous nations that descended from the ancestral peoples are the original inhabitants of this land.
I'd like to encourage you, whenever you're on a Zoom meeting, think about where you are and just take a moment to search and figure out who was on that land first and recognize them as well. So we are going to move forward, and if you're just joining us, let me remind you that remote attendees can put questions in the Q&A pane, not the chat pane, because we're not moderating that. And for attendees in the room, we will ask you to hold your questions until the end of each session. We'll try to get in as many as possible. If we don't get to them, some presenters will be here or online from 5 to 5:30, or we'll try to answer questions individually later in the next few days. And now, I'd like to introduce Karen Grandin. Our next session is going to be Designing Courses with Intention, Universal Design Benefits Everyone. And Karen is from our ASU library with a student panel.
Thank you, Adiro. And do we have David online? We have one student who's joining us remotely. Will be on via Zoom. So while we're waiting for David, my name is Karen Grandin. My pronouns are she, her, and I do work at ASU Library. I'm also working toward my graduate certificate in disability studies. And I want to thank these wonderful student panelists who have agreed to join us today and share their wisdom with us. And it looks like David is here now. So
yep.
we have a list of questions. We're going to try and get through them all, but we don't know if we will for sure. I will ask the questions and call on students. And the first question, David, I'm going to ask you to answer this one.
Okay.
Please introduce yourself. Tell us a bit about yourself, and also tell us what attracted you to ASU and what keeps you here.
I'm David. I'm a fourth-year PhD candidate in justice studies who is getting incredibly sick of looking at my dissertation right about now, but that's a different story. Let's see, what attracted me to ASU and what keeps me here? What attracted me to ASU was the opportunity to be on the cutting edge of research in the School of Social Transformation. And what keeps me here, and this is a very easy one for me, is my community, the people that I've met, the friends that I've made here. They are the reason that I do the work that I do. Be they still with us, or one friend in particular who isn't still with us, who is a huge influence on the things that I do and the work that I try and do toward equity.
Thank you. Athena.
Hello everyone, my name is Athena Garcia. I am a third-year student at ASU majoring in special education with an emphasis in visual impairments. I am part of the Teachers College as well as the president of the Braille Devils at ASU Student Org on the West Campus, as well as the director of education for the Accessibility Coalition.
Thank you. And Saren.
Hello? Oh, there we go. Just got to hold it really close. My name is Sarah Nutt. I use they, them pronouns. I am a student in the Watts College. I'm studying community advocacy and social policy. I'm a fifth-year non-traditional student. I do work full-time at ASU Library. You'll see me at the front desk if you ever stop in. And what keeps me here at ASU is, like David said, absolutely the community. It can be really hard being a non-traditional student, and really just having all of these wonderful people surrounding me and helping me stay motivated to accomplish my goals it's everything to me.
And last but not least, Isaac.
So, excuse me. Hi, so my name is Isaac Garcia. I originally started at ASU getting a graduate studies getting a graduate certificate in disability studies. And honestly, that's really what kind of attracted me to attend ASU. I had started very shortly after COVID had started, so like because everything that happened with COVID, I really kind of wasn't sure like what my next steps were gonna be. But I always knew that I wanted to go ahead and go back into education after graduating from San Francisco State with my bachelor's in sociology. So I was luckily able to find this graduate certificate in disability studies. And thankfully through that, most of my units have transferred over to a master's in justice studies. So I'm still currently working to complete that. Just have to finish up my thesis. Hopefully we'll be done by May, fingers crossed. Don't know, but hopefully. And currently I am also working as a management intern here in the MU, particularly with student engagement and student connection. So very grateful to be here.
All right, thank you all. Second question, we're going to start with Athena this time. What do you wish the ASU community knew about students with disabilities and your needs in particular?
Something that I do wish people knew about my needs is that every student with disabilities needs are different. So for example, not every student who is, blind or visually impaired will receive the same accommodation, as we all have our good days and bad days. And in addition to that, something that I wish that the ASU community knew about disability was that it is a spectrum and that everyone's experiences are different. So it is best to get to know the person with a disability instead of making, assumptions about, how severe or how not severe a disability they have or the accommodations that they don't use, because everyone's experience is individualized.
Thank you. We'll go to David next. And if I need to repeat the question, please let me know.
Athena, you hit on everything, literally everything I was going to say. Yeah, disability is a spectrum. That is, if everybody in the room, either virtually or in person, takes nothing else away from this whole discussion, and I hope there are many more takeaways, but if people take away nothing else, it's that disability is a spectrum, and we are not defined as people by our conditions. We are people first.
All right. All right, Isaac.
So I would say to kind of just reiterate what everybody else has already said, is that disability really is a spectrum. One solution that may work for somebody that has a specific disability may not necessarily work for somebody else who has a similar disability. Again, and being that everything kind of is on a spectrum, I think really just being able to kind of recognize that yes, there are various disabilities, and within that, also being able to kind of be able to get to know the student for who they are and kind of specifically what their needs may be, again, because not everybody's needs are specifically the same. So again, to kind of just reiterate what everybody said, I would say that disability is on a spectrum, and I also think too, particularly with my disability, specifically, I am visually impaired, legally blind, and at least in my case, a lot of the time, I've been told that the solution to visual impairment is often to just like enlarge things. That is a feature that you are able to like use on a computer or things like that. But a lot of the times, I think what people don't realize is that when it comes to enlarging things, you can really only enlarge things so much until it kind of messes with the picture and things get blurry. So I think that's also challenging, and also being able to recognize that at least in my situation, I'm sure others can kind of relate to this as well, but just being able to recognize that with visual impairment, in particular, my apologies, I did kind of lose my train of thought. So with visual impairment in particular, that if somebody does have to like look closer at things, even if they are enlarged just so they can see it, that also can kind of lead to like eye strain and pressure on the eyes that I think isn't necessarily thought of when people are told to just enlarge things.
Thank you, Isaac. And Saren?
One of the things that I wish people thought more about is that almost anyone can experience almost any disability at any point in their life. Like old people, disabilities don't exist. Anyone can experience back problems, mobility issues, something like that. And it really gets on my nerves when people say, oh, but you're so young. Yeah, I am only 22, but I do walk with a cane. There are days that I can't get out of bed. Like, anyone can become disabled, not just old people.
All right, thank you. Okay, so for this next question, we're going to start with you, Isaac. What resources do you find most helpful to you as an ASU student? It would be ASU provided resources, I should clarify.
So I was kind of looking at this question earlier, trying to figure out some of the resources, and one thing that did specifically stick out to me, I had taken, it was either last semester or the year before, but I had taken a Justice 437 class, and it was entitled Disability and Justice. It was an online class, and there was this really cool software that was kind of built into the class. I believe it was put in through Dr. Oliverio, who was the one who was teaching the class, but it was this really awesome software that was called Perusal, I believe. It was Perusal, and I found it really helpful because a lot of the times when you take classes online, PDFs are uploaded, and I think when it comes to like student accessibility, a lot of the time online classes are seen as more accessible because of the fact that they are online and the PDFs and stuff are already uploaded. But a lot of the time when it comes to uploading PDFs, they don't always get uploaded clearly, so it is another challenge to kind of like see visually off of a computer or an iPad. But what was really great about this software was that all of the readings for the class were already uploaded in that software. So you were able to have a feature where like the text would be able to like be read to you directly rather than just having to read it off of a PDF, or if you have an accommodation where you have a software like Kurzweil, which is it will like read like text and books to you and things like that. It was nice to already kind of have that built in a way where like you could understand the audio that was being read to you that was already built in, rather than having to kind of go outside of it for the PDF.
Thank you. All right, Saren, you're next.
Can you guys hear me? Oh, I think the resource that I use the most is my academic advisor. I've been really fortunate, and I just have this wonderful academic advisor. Her name's Danny Winhold, and she does so much for helping me manage a lot of the barriers that I come across. I struggle with a lot of executive dysfunction issues, and it can be really daunting to register for classes, not knowing what course load is going to be like. And she's really just wonderful at working with me every step of the way, and really making it a lot more simple and easy to manage.
Great, thank you. Athena?
I would say that the resource that has helped me a lot was also utilizing my academic advisor, because as someone with a visual impairment, I'm not able to go full-time, because if I spent like 2 to 3 hours at a time using the computer, my eyes get fatigued. And so I kind of need to like take that like half-hour to 1 hour break. And so I've had to tell my advisor about it, and they've been really flexible about enabling me to go to school, you know, part-time, even though I was taking 5 classes. Last semester, I know it's kind of a lot, so they have been a really wonderful team at making my schedule flexible, so I'm able to accomplish my classes at my own pace.
Terrific, thank you. And David?
I think for me, the biggest resource is alternative formats. It really helps my academic survival. That's the department at sales run by Jacob Bunch. Shout out, Jacob. And they convert books into large print or screen readable, in my case, screen readable Word documents. So.
All right, thank you. Next question, we're going to start with Saren. This is kind of the opposite of the last question. What barriers have you encountered at ASU, and what would you like to see ASU do to remove or reduce those barriers?
I've got a couple things written down, but I think I'm just going to talk about one. In my experience, it's really hard to get official accommodations. There's a lot of documentation, a lot of steps, and a lot of that is just not accessible to a lot of people. And so I don't receive any official accommodations from sales or from the university because of a lot of those barriers. And it's almost like they want to catch you, like, oh, you're not really disabled, like, whatever. And so I wish they would just make it so much more simple to access accommodations so that people like me who can't jump those hurdles can still receive help in the classroom.
Thank you. Isaac?
Do you mind saying the question one more time, Karen?
Sure. What barriers have you encountered at ASU, and what would you like to see ASU do to help remove or reduce those barriers?
Sure. Excuse me. So one barrier in particular that I face is the utilization of the DART services on campus. And if there are any of you that don't know exactly what DART is, basically it is a service that is provided through the Student Accessibility Office, sales, that aims to be able to basically pick up any student that is registered with sales or has a disability, that is able to pick them up anywhere on campus and to take them to any of their classes or anything that they may need to get to on campus. And so I would say that when the service has worked for me, it has definitely worked and it has been a big benefit. However, I think there is a bit of issues when it comes to the service in terms of scheduling. There have been a lot of moments where I have called in advance for a ride, and then the time frame for that ride comes and I'll be at whatever destination it is, and then they won't exactly be there on time, and then I'll call, and then there's an issue where I am not on the schedule when I have been registered with DART for quite a while at this time. So I think just when it comes to like scheduling and things like that, that's been a big barrier, and I think it's more of a barrier than just having to call them once I'm already at the spot. Like, it kind of creates an issue where, like, if I have a specific class to be at a certain time, like, I've went ahead and planned ahead and made sure that my ride is called, but when it comes time to be picked up at that spot, I often have had to recall, and thus have been late for classes and things like that. So that's definitely been one of the more larger barriers that I faced at ASU. And I think in terms of ASU being able to correct that, at least from my personal experience, one of the things that I have noticed, at least with jobs as it relates to relates to DART, a lot of those jobs, one of the main requirements is you have to have a driver's license. And at least in my case, or I'm sure various other disabled folks situations, driving isn't always something that we can necessarily accomplish because of our disability. So I think kind of being able to maybe create roles within that department where folks with disabilities who can probably help improve the program, since they are the ones using it. I think being able to like kind of create a space or like create a role for those who are using the services to be able to then go in and maybe help improve it. I think that would definitely improve that service at ASU.
Right. Thank you. David, you're next.
Okay, I'll go to the theme of accommodations also. I really wish, as Sarah was saying, that there was more flexibility in terms of how accommodations are like provided. Right now, there seems to be, at least in the academic accommodations arena, a kind of rigid adherence to the need for documentation. I wish that there was more room for student voice in receiving accommodations. That doesn't mean get rid of the documentation piece altogether, but it just means that if a student goes to a disability access consultant and says, hey, I don't have documentation of whatever type of, condition or whatever, but here's how that condition is impacting me on a day-to-day basis. I feel like there should be more like room to believe students, even if they don't necessarily have the documentation to back it up, because as Sarah was saying, there are significant barriers to getting documentation in the first place.
All right, thank you. And Athena.
One of the biggest barriers that I have encountered at ASU is textbook publishers not providing books in a PDF or digital format, because whenever I need to buy a textbook for a specific class, I'll need to buy the hard copy and then basically send the receipt over to sales in order for them to convert it into, Bookshare, for example. And it takes like a few weeks for me to get it. And so I believe that ASU needs to contact textbook publishers in general and let them know, like, hey, this student who is blind or visually impaired needs their textbook as soon as possible. and that it needs to be provided in large print or even Braille instead of just the hard copy being purchased online.
All right, thank you. We're going to start, Athena, we're going to start with you on this next question. How can ASU be a more inclusive campus for students with disabilities to feel heard, seen, and to participate in society?
One way that ASU can definitely be more inclusive is learning how to basically accommodate and interact with individuals who have disabilities, because a lot of us don't understand, what to do or how to assist someone when we, come across someone who has a disability. And it's important to not make assumptions and instead learn how to create that inclusive space in order for us to, share our experiences or learning how campus events can be more widely accessible across the ASU community.
All right, thank you. Next is David for that question.
Yeah, I would say, as the theme that we've been hitting on throughout this whole time, greater flexibility, in terms of how processes are done, especially accommodations, would lead to greater levels of inclusion and belonging, I think, for students with disabilities. So yeah, I would just say greater flexibility, less of a bare minimum compliance lens in terms of how ASU thinks about disability service provision. That would be a huge step toward realizing the charter's goal of inclusion.
All right, thank you. Isaac, I'm going to ask you this next, or it's your turn, I should say.
And can you say the question one more time, Karen?
Yes, of course. How can ASU be a more inclusive campus for students with disabilities to feel heard, seen, and participate in society?
Okay. Yeah, so I think, in order for ASU to really become a more inclusive university, in order to make students with disabilities feel more seen and heard, I think, so I think especially when it comes to talking about accommodations, and kind of the process of what it takes to get accommodations and the conversations that students are having with accessibility consultants, and then from there, the conversations that they have to have with their teachers, just so the professors know that they have accommodations. I think if a lot of that responsibility from the students having to kind of make that effort of having to find out where the accessibility office is, then provide documentation, and then kind of have these conversations about their disabilities, that I think kind of just making it to where like a lot of that responsibility falls on the student rather than the university reaching out and being like, how can we, how can we assist you, rather than having it where the students have to find all the resources to get their accommodations. I think creating a space where having like faculty and staff kind of take that initiative, I think that would also make students with disabilities feel more comfortable in being able to speak about their disabilities, and also by doing that, being able to minimize the stigma that students with disabilities are already facing when they do have to have these discussions.
All right, thank you. And Saren?
I think the biggest way that ASU can create a more inclusive environment is by increasing hybrid options for attending class and organizational meetings. One of the wonderful things about COVID is that we had all of these hybrid options where you could go to class, you could attend class on Zoom. There were just a lot of different options, and ASU spent all of this money putting all of this infrastructure in place in order to support this. And then once we got to about 2021, 2022, all of those hybrid options disappeared, and a lot of this new infrastructure that ASU spent all this money on is not being used in many cases. It shouldn't be a problem to attend class on Zoom, especially if you're a student with chronic pain and can't leave the house. If you can't access your own transportation and your ride suddenly isn't able to take you. There's a lot of different reasons that we need to offer hybrid options to be able to participate in university life. And I honestly don't see any reason not to.
Okay, thank you. And this is going to be the last question for our panelists before we go to Q&A from the audience. So we'll start, David, we'll start with you. What advice do you have for other students with disabilities?
This one's very easy for me because this has led to my survival. Find your people. Find your people. Whomever that might look like, whatever that looks like. Find your people, because you cannot do this academic journey with all of its ups and downs, all of the complications of it alone. Doing this alone sucks. And so don't do that to yourself.
All right, thank you. And we have the 5-minute warning. So Athena, you're next.
My advice would be to definitely reach out to people and ask for help, because asking for that assistance and self-advocacy is a really important skill to have, whether you need help on a class or you need help collaborating on a club's, leadership team. It's really important to not be ashamed to reach out to people, because you're not being a bother to someone because you need the help, whether it's for counseling, mental health, or any of the ASU resources here. It's important to reach out for assistance. And my other piece of advice would be to actually get really involved in student orgs based on your interests and major, because like David said, it's really important to find your people, and being involved in extracurriculars has really helped me grow in my communication and collaboration skills as well.
All right, thank you. Saren.
My advice would be that it's okay to take your time. It's okay to only take one class in a semester. It's okay to drop your classes if you find out that you have too much on your plate. And it's okay to not graduate in the time that you expected to graduate. When I started, I went into a 4-year degree program. I'm now on year 5 and I have 3 years left. And I'm still learning to be okay with that, but the fact of the matter is that it is okay.
All right, thank you. And Isaac.
So I would say that my advice to students with disabilities is really just don't be afraid to ask for help. I know a lot of the time there can definitely be stigma and kind of shame about asking for help, or not accepting disability or not identifying as being disabled. So even with that, I think really just kind of being able to go into this situation and not be afraid to ask questions. I think more often than not, you will find that people are willing to help you, and definitely just go ahead and don't be afraid to ask questions. And like David said and everybody else was saying, definitely find your people. There are so many clubs on campuses, a bunch of clubs that I found that I didn't even know existed until I started working at the MU. But really just, if you have an interest, odds are there is a club for it, and if there's not, then you can definitely go ahead and start one. But definitely be sure to just find your people and find your community, because once you have those people, it'll make this a lot easier.
All right. Thank you all. Now we'll take some questions from the audience. Krista has a microphone. She'll bring it around to people in the room, and we're also monitoring Zoom for questions.
Hi, so my question is, what kind of class structures or policies have made things easier for you to participate and succeed in class, especially ones that didn't come just because of your disability, but were just built into the class?
I think for me, one of the biggest things is flexible due dates. I'm neurodivergent. I can't always get things done on a deadline, but it definitely does help to have a deadline. And so the ability to just shoot a message to my professor, be like, hey, there is absolutely no way this is gonna get done by Friday night. Can I have until Saturday night or Sunday night or even the following Friday? It really helps. And it's shame you for that.
Does anyone else want to answer that?
Okay, I have a question from online, from Christopher. He says, in terms of your digital experiences, what is one feature you immediately notice is absent or not supported when you need to access it?
I'll take that one. Now there is this great feature that Jacob was part of putting together. It's called the Ally tool. It allows you to convert text into accessible formats on your own, which is great. It's so much faster than sometimes having sales do it, because Jacob and his staff are overwhelmed. But here's the caveat, right? The original text that you get from uploaded from your instructor has to be of decent quality. And so if you get something that has, for example, notes in the margins, or is a scan of an old textbook or an old book chapter, we've all used those, we've all seen them. The conversion that you get will basically be gibberish, because the tool won't be able to decipher it.
Thank you. Any other questions in the room? Okay, I do have one question online that may be appropriate for a faculty or a sales representative later, about why the rigidity in the requirements for accommodations. I'm not sure if anyone wants to answer that. Sorry, Adira, I was looking at you, but I wasn't going to call your name, since we have time if you'd like to come up and answer that.
Okay, so we have laws that we're following in order to spend the money that the federal government provides to support accommodations. But that really doesn't limit what faculty do. It limits what sales does.
All right, do we have any last questions? Are we out of time, or do we want to? Oh, we have one more question.
Hey, thank you, panel, for today. I just had a question in general. The last question really resonated with me in regard to finding your people. and you all kind of had different examples. So I'm curious to know what are ways ASU can help improve that student journey for you as you even initially come into ASU. So, for example, like Isaac, you used the example of not everybody's open to, you know, asking questions or going to get help. So is there any other like idea that you may have that would help benefit the group of how we can improve that journey for you?
Yeah, hold on, let me kind of formulate my answer here. Yeah, I think, I mean, okay, so like I would say, I think kind of just being able to like have more events like this, you know, where it is a group of faculty or people who work at ASU that may not, you know, that may not be as aware as they could be about various disabilities and things like that. So I think really kind of just being able to have events like this that do bring that awareness to kind of, you know, like let professors know that not all disabilities are the same and that we are all individual people and that we all may have different needs. So yeah, I think just kind of being able to have events like this, especially that are kind of guided by folks that do have disabilities, I definitely think that would kind of just help within like our journey of also feeling more like included in various events that are around campus.
One idea that I've had before, and this is a really huge ask, but a lot of high schools have programs where they will pair a senior up with a freshman as like a one-on-one mentor for the whole year. I think that would be a really excellent idea. Maybe it's through the college or the dorms or something like that, but I think having that one-on-one mentorship where you've got someone who's like a built-in friend that can show you the ropes of being on campus, can help you find resources. Even if they don't know the answer to a question, they can show you how to locate resources, and is just there as an ally, as a friend, as an older sibling type figure. I think that would be a really excellent way to do things.
All right, thank you. Krista, are we at time?
We have, I think, 5 more minutes
Okay.
if we have questions. I do have one from online. From Janice. There seems to be a patchwork of services. How do you find them? Is it word of mouth? Advice from advisors? What would work best for you?
I can speak to this one a little bit too. For me, finding resources has been a lot of word of mouth. You hear something from a friend or an advisor or something, and then you really just kind of have to dig into it yourself. I do know that there's a lot of resources that exist that get missed and underutilized because they're so hard to find. And then eventually those resources just kind of disappear because they don't get used. That is a really big issue that I know I face, and I know a lot of other students face as well.
Anybody else want to answer that question? One more question from the audience.
Actually, I was going to jump in on that one. I'm not an advisor, but I was for a long time. And I think you're totally right. It's just a lot of word of mouth. And part of that is just because ASU is huge. There are policies that I find all the time when I'm just, you know, bored and scrolling through policy pages, because that's what people do when they're bored. But I think the most important thing, certainly for students to do, but also as faculty and staff, is to talk to each other about it. Because there were so many resources that I found as an advisor because I had students bringing them to me and saying, hey, this is something that I really need in my classes. Do you know what professors are better with this? I was like, oh, no, but I'm gonna find out. So I started asking all my other students, hey, in case you're wondering, like, how flexible is this professor? Do you think they'd be a good match for somebody who needs this kind of help? And then in talking to other advisors, that's also what we had to do. And it was just one of those things that doesn't come up in conversation unless you make it come up in conversation. Because yes, you might have maybe 1 or 2 students in your student load who need that help, but they need the help. And we have to make that important to us.
Yes, thank you. So if there aren't any more questions, do any of the student panelists have any short final words they would like to say? Any wisdom you'd like to impart or share with everyone? Okay, thanks, Isaac.
All right, so final words. So I just kind of wanted to thank everybody for, first of all, coming to this, and for Karen letting me know about this. Really appreciate it. I would say really to kind of just reiterate what everybody else has said and all the points that have been brought up. Just really being able to recognize that students with disabilities, they're not just something that has to be recognized by like an outsider. So basically meaning like, you don't necessarily have to have like a walking stick, or you don't have to be in a wheelchair to have a disability. I think a lot of the times, people that have disabilities often get like characterized by using a wheelchair and things like that. But again, there are all sorts of various disabilities, and really at the end of the day, you don't know what somebody may be going through. So just because they don't quote unquote look disabled to you doesn't necessarily mean that they are or not. So I think really just kind of being able to recognize that everybody has things that they do go through, whether or not they do identify as folks with disabilities. And one other thing too, to kind of connect to the other question about resources and things like that. So kind of how I found out a lot about the various resources that I've used. One is a club that I found out about through a disability course that I took in called Devil's Adapt. It's basically a gym program for folks that have disabilities, where you get partnered up with a student trainer 2 to 3 times a week, and basically go on this whole like fitness journey 2 to 3 times a week, where it helps with your mental health. It can help you to get stronger. And that is a service or a resource that I wouldn't have known about had I not taken that disability course. So I think really being able to kind of not just limit that information to classes where disability is talked about, because again, there are a lot of folks that don't necessarily identify as disabled, so may not take a course like that and have that access. So really kind of just being able to bring resources like that kind of to the forefront and get more people to speak about them. I definitely think that would be really important for ASU to improve on and continue to do. But yeah, just wanted to thank everybody for the panel, and thanks everybody for coming.
All right. And thank you to our panelists, and we are at time. All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Karen, for bringing this panel together, and thank you to Saren, Athena, Isaac, and David for sharing your experiences here at ASU.